You can experience video games in a way unlike any other form of modern media. You can play them casually, competitively, with more of a focus on completing them 100%, and none of these are wrong. Doing this with any other form of media just isn't feasible. You can't speedrun a movie. It takes a special kind of outlook to get into speedrunning, one that I hope translates in some way to other parts of life. Eating breakfast will never be the same again. Generally speaking, the concept of speedrunning a video game is so alien to me. It's just, I like to take my time playing, and the idea of someone finding an optimum path while constantly looking for new ways of shaving fractions of a second off your best time, it's both bizarre and fucking incredible. I can have admiration for something that confuses me. And yet there are aspects of speedrunning that come under some contention. For some, the pursuit of beating a game as fast as possible should be restricted by what was intended by the developers, and the glitches? Don't do them. I for one enjoy seeing a game broken apart and beaten in a way that I would have never imagined when playing through it myself. Really, it just tests a player's ability to pull off frame-perfect inputs and exploit discrepancies within a game's code. All categories have their place. It makes these achievements all the crazier. Seeing a difficult game destroyed by a speedrunner is quite the spectacle. For one, it's a raw display of talent that becomes evident when you compare it with your own experiences of the game, but it also highlights little tips and tricks that were never even in the picture when you were trying to battle your way through these levels. Hey, it's fine, the more you play a hard game, the more you'll understand how everything works within the game's physics engine, to the point where you'll be able to get some consistent change out of a game like Super Monkey Ball. And that game fucking hates you. When considering the hardest games of all time, the Super Monkey Ball games are often overlooked, and generally that's for a very good reason, because while they are hard and borderline impossible at the outset, you keep plugging away at it and you will eventually start getting some results. But you need to see a speedrun of one of these games, because the speed of movement, where they end up going, it'll blow your mind. A typical playthrough of a Super Monkey Ball game can be described as barely controlled chaos, and getting better at it simply gives you back a bit more control every time. Momentum-based puzzle platformers are all about knowing what your actions are going to result in at any one moment, so when you're speeding through the levels as fast as possible, you get the glorious sight of a monkey flying across the screen with a surprising amount of control behind it. Levels that usually require a slow, methodical approach because humans are prone to error and jittery hands, are blitzed through by launching towards the goal and somehow sticking that landing. Occasionally there's a stage that can be beaten by just holding up, but I reckon that's alright just for levels like these. I'm not sure how he ended up over here, but I think I'm gonna go with it for now. The vast, expansive worlds of Elder Scrolls. Such limitless possibility for adventure, being able to go anywhere you want and use whatever crazy weapons you can find. Or, if you want to get things done with a bit of briskness and the concept of slowly walking around exploring every corner of a world makes you sick, take a bucket with you. I spent maybe 60 or 70 hours getting to Skyrim's end credits, but there are ways of getting the game finished in under an hour, and that both amazes me and irritates the hell out of me. Still, the meeting of the warring factions still feels like it takes a long time, so you know, that's alright. Anyway, back to the bucket, one of the most broken items in this game. You can put it on the heads of NPCs and get away with anything you want, but while this is hilarious, it's not very fast. Thankfully, you can also use the mystical bucket to boost up to ledges you can't otherwise access, or, since Skyrim has problems with obstacle collision just about everywhere, you can simply clip through walls by throwing yourself at a bucket. Walls are only a suggestion anyway, don't worry too much about them. Also, there's a funky glitch where you get married, but trigger a flashback cutscene during your ceremony, and the cutscene becomes playable for some reason. Also, this man is very high in the sky. You know, sometimes you push this game too hard and things break. It's okay though, they've hired the right person. He knows what he's doing. Given the obsession with speed and going fast, you'd imagine that no video games from this period of history or the next is more suited to speedrunning than Sonic the Hedgehog. It's like his whole thing. I think back to my most cherished memories from playing Sonic games, and it's where the gameplay has had some flow to it and you're darting all over the screen en route to the end. The skill needed to be able to control Sonic as you zip through a stage at light speed is really admirable, but sometimes I want to see something a little crazier. Even with all its numerous problems, you can have quite a bit of fun while playing Sonic 06. When the game goes wrong and cracks under pressure, which happens quite often, it's a beautiful sight that everyone should experience at some point. The glitches are well documented at this stage, but would you believe that when you use them to your advantage to speed through Sonic 06 as fast as possible, they actually turn it into a pretty decent game? No, seriously, they're a problem and sometimes a source of entertainment casually, but when you can launch yourself across the map or easily trigger scripts within the game ahead of time, it seems deliberate in a way. Maybe this is the true way to play this game. Maybe Sega are geniuses after all. There's a bunch of glitches in Sonic 06 that help to make the game feel just a bit more streamlined, and if you use them correctly, you might be able to save some time. But if you do the right steps, you can skip straight to the credits about half an hour in. You even get a little something on the story select screen saying that you've got 100% completion on that specific story. Given some of the design choices behind this game, that may well have been intentional. The natural escalation of physics-based platform puzzles, scarcely controllable trials and environmental awareness is obviously Portal. Can you really compare Super Monkey Ball with Portal? Well, yeah, I just did. They're basically the same game. Chell from Portal functions as a monkey trapped in a ball forced to work through levels of increasing complexity and difficulty. Thankfully, Portal isn't as hard as Super Monkey Ball, so there's less of a departure between what the average player is capable of and what supercomputers can do. You watch the first 5 minutes or so of a Portal speedrun and I don't know, it all looks fairly basic. Bit of backwalking here, careful portal placement here, and things are happening now. Is this what the center of the universe looks like? So being a slightly janky game made by Valve, Portal comes with numerous glitches that you can exploit, which turn a short game into one that can be chewed up and spat out in the space of 10 minutes, thanks to being able to break the very fabric of reality, which may upset purists. But even without upsetting the laws of physics and Neil deGrasse Tyson, Portal is doable inside 20 minutes. And let me tell you, some of the tactics to save time in the glitchless category are clinically insane. Of course you can jam a door with the radio. What do you mean you've never tried that?
The Enrichment Center regrets to inform you that this is impossible. Make no attempt to solve it. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, no, this works. Carry on. Any game with a large amount of random chance is going to be a bit of a hard sell as a popular speedrun game. You'd like to think that player skill can win out in the end, but sometimes this isn't always the case. It is kind of hard to manipulate the game when the game doesn't even know what's coming next. Doesn't stop people from trying though. I honestly didn't know that Spelunky was so popular for speedruns, especially since there's every reason why it shouldn't be. Randomly generated roguelike games are hard to manipulate in your favour and require a lot of thinking on your feet if you are to get a good time. What's a good time for Spelunky then? Ooh, I'd say anywhere from 1 minute to roughly 2 minutes, but you'd only take that long if you stopped to read a book on the way through. You might think that there's not a lot of excitement to be had in a speedrun where the world record is under 100 seconds, but I find that shorter times result in finer margins for error and a greater emphasis of optimizing movement through a level. The teleporter is both your best friend and your worst enemy. Not to mention that Spelunky is a hard game when it wants to be. There aren't a load of levels, but there's kind of a reason for that. Monsters are placed in locations where approaching them has to be done very carefully, otherwise you get comboed into oblivion. But also, the shopkeeper is the angriest man in the world, and every other surface has insta-kill spikes on them. You know, it's hard to process what a time of 1:39 looks like in a game where I keep dying. But that's the hilarious thing, because Spelunky has a built-in time limit of 1:30 that, when surpassed, assumes that the player is cheating. If you need a sign that you're pushing limits that shouldn't be pushed, don't steal from the shopkeeper. He's a very angry man. The more you subdivide a video game into small accomplishments that are timed by the game, the more you encourage people to play through the game as a whole as fast as possible. Since Mario games are split up into individual levels and often come with a timer, they're almost set up to be played quickly. Maybe we'll see one of those in a bit. But for now, I'd like to talk about Super Meat Boy, which functions a lot like Mario but made by people who like beating orphans with crowbars. Basically a platformer for sadists where you'll die an unreal number of times, but that's okay because you respawn quickly and the music is sweet as fuck, so maybe that's enough of an incentive to speedrun it. Real talk though, it's only when you see someone play this game who knows what they're doing that you realize how well made this game is. Glitches are a premium here, so getting to the final boss and beyond rely on pure player skill. And more so than with a lot of other games out there, you can see how high the skill ceiling is here. Even so, and despite bouncing off of walls for fun, anyone who isn't going for individual level records will still be dying a fair number of times. Granted, getting to the end will result in maybe 1/100th of the deaths of the normal run, but it's nice to know that even the upper end of Super Meat Boy related talent can find some obstacles. These levels took me most of a day to complete though, so... No, it's fine, I can deal with that. Your standard RPG is many things, but fast is not one of them. You notice this when looking at how most of these games frame their opening stages, and speedruns of lengthy RPGs do exist, but they tend to be a little lengthy, actually. Pokemon is often billed as the RPG series for people who don't appreciate most of the conventions of a typical role-playing game, but arguably there's even more random factors to worry about if you were to speedrun it. It's all this choice you have, and there will always be an optimal path, but working that out takes a lot of trial and error. Or you could play the first generation and turn it into an almost puzzle game. In the same way as Sonic 06, the glitches in Pokemon Red, Blue, and probably Yellow are pretty characterful and not that hard to pull off. But what's entertaining is that the code behind these games is so highly strung, so just about working, that you can exploit certain scripts and executions to achieve anarchy, really. At this point, and when you've got the game's code in a vice grip, you can do whatever you like, really. Want to skip to the credits? You can do that. Want to skip the Elite Four? You can do that. Do you want to collect every Pokemon, including Mew? I'm not sure of the specifics, but yeah, you can do that too. Of course you can beat this game without glitches if you're a purist, but sometimes you need to see a game exposed in such a ridiculous way to appreciate everything else. It takes the random element out and replaces it with the game shitting the bed quite spectacularly. One of which I've seen way too often, one I wish I could see more of. You almost feel sorry for the game, it does not know what's going on anymore. A lot of games feel like they were built for speed due to smart bits of game design or massive game-abusing glitches that practically invite players to somehow get to the end much earlier than expected. Sometimes you can do this without the game freaking out, which is more commonly referred to as sequence breaking. You look hard enough and you can find sequence breaks in 99% of games out there, but some games feel as though they were designed with these workarounds in mind, allowing someone to play a game out of order if they knew what they were doing. It sounds so weird to say it like that because you'd guess that developers want everything with a degree of control, but Super Metroid says otherwise. I mean, this game is basically the king of speedruns. Either people got into speedrunning because of Super Metroid, or from watching people beat the shit out of Super Metroid, or hearing people donate to save or kill small animals at a GDQ event. Frames are important. The animals must burn. The ways in which you can save time in this game feel very nearly planned by the developers for players who know what to do. You can use the wall jump to pick up power bombs early, which then let you beat Kraid sooner, and collect the gravity suit to fight Dragon, this guy, earlier than normal. And while there are glitches that you can use to your advantage, there aren't many that feel like you're embarrassing the base code of Super Metroid. By the way, if you beat this game within 3 hours, you get the best ending where Samus takes off her power suit. The speedrun record is currently under 42 minutes, so... You know, I'm just saying. And now I guess it's time for me to talk about Mario games, having briefly mentioned it earlier. In reality, they function like Super Meat Boy, but infinitely more accessible. You can start off with practicing individual levels or navigation around a hub world before combining everything together in one of the many different categories associated with a game like Super Mario 64 or Sunshine. The 3D games are arguably the best showcase of the knowledge behind controlling Mario efficiently through maintaining his momentum at crucial stages to skip large sections or perform glitches, but despite that, I still prefer Super Mario World. You know, generally I prefer this game, partly because it's the perfect game for this kind of perspective, but also because of the different ways you can approach it, speedrun or otherwise. I always loved how you could happily play through the game as normal, finding every exit and beating Bowser at the end of a wholly satisfying adventure. Or you could just hightail it to the Star Road as soon as possible and end up at Bowser's doorstep in no time at all. Speedruns simply show how quickly these routes can be done, while also showcasing the different variety of self-imposed challenges a runner can put in place, because the cape feather is hilariously overpowered. Or through an elaborate selection of highly specific actions like duplicating blocks, eating Koopa shells and grabbing a coin, you can somehow warp to the credits in little over a minute after starting the game up. You think the cape is powerful, it's got nothing on Yoshi and one important coin. It's a shame too, since Bowser got this new clown car thing and you don't even get to see it. Poor guy, he tries so hard. The speedrun record progression for Zelda games over the years is genuinely fascinating. These aren't short games in the slightest. On a first playthrough, if you're looking to do some exploring and some side quests, you're looking at a clear time in the region of 25 to 30 hours. These are long games. Even Breath of the Wild, which is the best naturally set up game in the series for speedrunning, takes an age to beat casually. These are reflected in the speedrun records, where despite finding ways of shaving hours off of a run, they're still fairly long. Special mention to Wind Waker's barrier skip, where after years of trial and error, this obnoxious force field that restricts access to the final area was successfully negotiated, helping to shave more than 2 hours off of the record. But I remember people trying to skip the Door of Time in Ocarina of Time to get the Master Sword way earlier than you should. Those were simpler times. Nowadays, Ocarina of Time as a speedrun is a glorious clusterfuck of glitches that pluck bottles out of thin air, kill Gohma in 3 seconds and warp Link to all sorts of wacky places. The wrong warp works because magic and maybe confused bits of coding, but it allows poor little child Link to reach Ganon's castle from the Deku Tree, and then do more bullshit in order to reach the bottom, skipping roughly most of this game. Again, because it's such a short speedrun, small mistakes make a big difference, and since no one's run it perfectly yet, the record can still be bested. Ocarina of Time can be beaten faster, and that is madness. And yet, there's another kind of interesting elephant in the room, Ocarina of Time 3D. When Grezzo remade this game for the 3DS, they removed glitches like wrong warp, but somehow managed to unearth a whole new world of problems that still make a rapid speedrun very doable. You can't warp to Ganon's castle, but as a consolation, you can skip to the credits by using Furore's Wind as you step into this warp, effectively making King Dodongo the final boss of this game. And that's kinda cool, but not nearly as amazing as using the same trick to send Link into Purgatory for roughly 2 minutes. After which you'll be in control of the file used in the game's title screen, with all the items needed to beat the game the slightly more conventional way. You'd be surprised how many Zelda games let you affect the title screen in some way. These games are so well made. This is RabbidLuigi, and there remains a debate over whether or not massive glitches can really be considered within the spirit of the skill required for a speedrun, but in games like Ocarina of Time, it takes a large amount of understanding in order to pull these off. Getting a credits warp is not easy, though if you were able to do this within seconds of booting up the game, does it even count as you beating this game? When is a game not a game? Do we even exist?